Hello world, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm going to answer some questions I've been asked over the last couple of years regarding information security. I will give a disclaimer that I am but one source of information and not the source of information. There will be some common threads that will come off as correct, but there's not a do A, B, and C and you're going to get to D. It's not a linear journey, I'll say that. These questions, if you have more especially, it will be ultimately it'll be up to you to do your due diligence to figure out what works best for you. These questions are based on, I'm going to answer them based on my own experiences and not the general populace, because I don't have the experience of the general populace. They may or may the things I did may or may not work for you, but at the very least, it will get you in a direction or give you one set of answers. I will do a second part of this video next where I break down what exactly I did that worked and some of the stumbling blocks along the way. So with that, instead of doing a top 10 or top 5, I decided to do a prime number, so we're going to go with 7 questions today. The first one, what if you don't know where to start? A lot of us started off kind of knowing what we wanted to do or kind of having an answer, but a lot of us didn't, and that's okay. The best thing I can tell you is just start talking to people. You may not have the exact questions, but definitely talking to a lot of people, and this is why I say get a broad range of people to talk to answering your questions. You're going to get a broad set of answers, and you'll be able to filter out what works from there. The more information you have to work with, the more you can filter out, and the more specific to what you want and how you get there will work for you. Specifically, like, I'm not going to have answers to every single question. I'm not a pen tester. There's a lot of things, even on the defensive side, that I don't do. Like, I would defer to a lot of other people for things like forensics or going really deep down the compliance rabbit hole. One thing I'd recommend, and this is where I say will help with the broad answers, is there's a series of books I tend to like. Tribe of Hackers. Marcus J. Carey and Jennifer Jen put these together, asking lots of people questions. If I recall correctly, they, in each of the different series of books, they ask professionals in the field specific questions. I have the red team edition of that book. There we go. Yeah, I have the red team edition of it. I may get the other ones at some point and or down there. I'm not going to go too much details on the books, but I highly recommend doing research and definitely picking up those books. The next thing I'd recommend, and what was helpful for me or what worked for me, was a lot of the conferences. I'd been going to DEF CON and some local conferences like CoreCon, Layer 1, and that's all good, but there are other ones out there, and not just the standard ones. You've got your security B-sides. Those are helpful. I actually have volunteered at a couple of them, and they're a lot of fun. Definitely volunteering helped too, as far as meeting people and getting my foot out there. In fact, I'm recording on OBS right now, and I'm remembering my first experience using OBS was actually volunteering for Security B-Sides Vegas, and they needed some help with the making sure the views and everything and were set up properly with one of the conferences I worked in. So I didn't have to do all that much, to be honest, but making sure the speaker was in view of the camera and I could see all the different settings in OBS. I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. I didn't realize that's what they make this stuff with. So going to conferences, actually, there's a lot of other little things I picked up along the way. And I also talked to a lot of people. As far as finding conferences, now this is where it gets tricky. I'm gonna, especially because most of my conferences were in the before time. I'll use an example of Miami, as that is a city I've never been to. So there's a site infosecconferences.com. I found a lot of events on here that might have been security adjacent, or having other things in them that weren't necessarily security, but this will list a lot of different events. If you are someone that hosts and sponsors events and creates events, and want to get the word out there, I highly recommend adding your events to the site as well. Oh, I'm not even sharing that. You can find all the different conferences. You can find conferences. There are a lot that are probably not on here. I'd highly recommend people adding them as they see them, as they find them, and posting links. Another place I'd go for different events would be Meetup. You might find some security groups. And I'm using Miami as an example for this because I've never been to Miami before. So you have other ones like Eventbrite. I found a lot of different events on here as well. There are also, I'll get to the chapter events in a sec. I have found with a lot of these conferences, or not just ones that are in here, it might not be a security conference per se, but it could be security adjacent, like a software dev conference or web applications or some other thing that might have security related talks in there. One thing I did in the past that was helpful for getting my foot in the door, or at least getting to answering those, like I said, narrowing down those questions. It wasn't just security related content I would go to. Back when I was doing sysadmin work, I'd get invited to, say, a storage conference or two, or infrastructure hardware related conferences that happen to have security related talks. So, or they'd be partnered with vendors that did security related things, like identity access management and other tools. So I'd start talking to more of these people and getting more of my questions answered, or starting a conversation. And that was really helpful too. You also have these other ones like your organization base. So ISC Square, they have a chapter, it looks like, in South Florida. And no, there's a DEF CON group. There's more likely going to be one, I think, DC 305. That'll help. 2600, I've been to one or two of these in different places. And this, the thing you'll also realize is with these events, your miles may vary depending on what city you're in. Some are much more active than others. You might get some that'll do CTFs at their events on a monthly basis, or the thing. A lot of cool stuff there. You have other groups. Like I said, if there's a group, whether it be OWASP or ISSA or others, there is more than likely a chapter in a major city. If you're not in a major city, this is where it gets a little tricky, and you might have to find the next nearest major city, and I'll cover that in one of my other questions. On to question number 2. Do I need a degree and or certification? Well, the short answer is no. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Think of it kind of like your typical role-playing games where you have these different attributes, you have points you start off with. And the best analogy I can give, whether you have a degree, certifications, or just a lot of hands-on experiences, you might be really strong in one of those things where you have a ton of credentials, but you might need to develop some others. Balance helps. It may or may not always. Your miles are going to vary on a lot of factors. If you're in a city, especially with a lot of government jobs and or DoD related things, you may need a certification a lot more than others. If you are near a place where there's colleges and stuff like that nearby, particularly I'm thinking like Silicon Valley, you've got Stanford and Berkeley, or a lot of college-centric areas, you might have a lot more startups, so you might not need certifications or degrees or specific credentials, but you might need a portfolio of projects you've worked on or different things you contributed to. And from the other side of it, like if I'm interviewing someone, I'm not going to dismiss any one thing. I may ask us more specific questions. I'll probably focus on what's on their resume and key in questions from there. There are definitely going to be some basic technical things you'll need to know, different depending on the role that is. If it's but based on the questions I'm being asked for this, I'm going to assume you're less than 5 years of experience or trying to get your foot in the door. So definitely having the basic technical stuff is going to be helpful. But ultimately, whether you have a degree or certification, your ability to learn new topics or have a focus towards something will help. They aren't deal breakers. In some cases, depending solely on one of those things will hinder you a little bit. Definitely bringing something more to the table than just what acronyms you have next to your name will be pretty helpful. So the answer number 2 would be it depends, but don't depend solely on just credentials if of those things. And regardless of either one, don't be that person that lies on their resume. That's probably not the way to go. And even exaggerating, like if you don't know something, don't put it on there, because the chances are, if you're being interviewed, that person's going to be looking at your resume. But with that, that's all I have for number 2. On to number 3. What if you don't have enough resources? Okay, so this is I'm speaking specifically to people that might not live near a large metro area, or have a low budget, and that's definitely coming from people that are coming in, getting their foot in the door. They might have there's a lot of constraints going on, and there may be some that are beyond your control. That's something we all have to work with, but there are some that are within your control. So not enough resources. This one I can answer a bit easier, because I may or may not have not known all the answers where to go. I knew what I want. I had an idea of what I wanted to do, but then how do you build these skills up? 20 or so years ago, or back in even as far as back as the 80s, there weren't classes and trainings and certifications and all this stuff. A lot of the people that learned all this stuff, they learned it, for lack of a better word, the hard way, and doing the stuff in the real world. However, nowadays we have a lot of resources at our disposal, to a point where if you're doing any kind of pen testing in the real world without permission, without authorization from the owner of said site or thing you're pen testing, it's pretty much illegal at this point. Like, if you have an urge if you're competitive and want to do like competitions, there's CTFs. If you want to get in this and be an independent researcher, there's bug bounties and things like that where you can make money. If you wanted to do this to challenge yourself and not deal with like competitions, there's VulnHub, a bunch of other platforms out there. So with that, here's a few resources that come to mind for those who don't have enough resources. So you want to get into reverse engineering. There's CrackMe's. You can download a bunch of binaries and tinker with them and find all the tools you'll need. There is CTF time, especially for you more competitive folks. I'm speaking a lot on this stuff because this is helpful for me as far as learning different tools and things. I found I happen to find a lot of friends that were into this stuff, into the pen testing offensive side of things. So this is where a lot of the links I have are going to go down that rabbit hole. You have other ones like TryHackMe. That's pretty good, especially for there's specifically offense and defense that'll help. Like if you want to learn learn how to use different tools, this is really helpful too. Hack the Box is another good one that's a lot of fun. You do all kinds of stuff on there. Shout out to IPSEC. He's a guy that's done a lot of boxes on Hack the Box and is probably one of the main go-to people for learning all the offensive related things on that platform and going through different challenges. Another one that's good, if you don't want to be on a VPN or anything like that, is VulnHub. You can download these virtual machines and do a bunch of different things on there and learn a lot of different tools. You'll find a lot more Linux machines on this one, specifically because of Microsoft's cost of licensing. If you are watching this video and you can listen to the sound of my voice, you have most of what you need to learn how to do the things in security. There's podcasts, a bunch of other things out there, plenty of resources to go. Next question up: what if you don't have enough experience? This is one you were here for, or one of many. You want to get in security and you don't have enough experience. Ironically, I ran into this myself, trying to get my foot in the door, despite working in IT for a very long time, doing a lot of different roles, from help desk, desktop support, to sysadmin and senior sysadmin roles, and some engineering roles. One thing that's interesting about that is when people are looking, especially even if it's like 1 to 2 years experience, they'll be like, you don't have enough security experience on your resume, where jobs where you're doing specific security. Even if I was doing like patch management. Well, it doesn't say you are a security, but it's patch management, right? So here's my solution for this: is if you don't have enough, is create your own. And this is where I mentioned the stuff about and where I got into the whole community piece of it with like the blogging and creating content. One thing I did was a while back I started a blog, and I would just put a bunch of stuff like CTFs I've done on there, different projects, a few resources. Some of the stuff I'm talking about now I posted on the blog a while back, and this was helpful because I did it in my own words, my own research. If you were to look up the domain history, this domain, I've had this domain for a few years now. So it actually augments some of the experience I have from working professionally. You know, I've got some stuff on here on tools I've worked on, and I recommend people doing this. You don't have to go full bore and buy your own domain. And this goes back to that previous question about not having a lot of resources. So if you don't have the money to own your own domain, it's not that expensive, but for some it may be more expensive, especially depending on how you want to do it. This is just the WordPress site. I throw notes up here every now and then, and here we are. So for those of you that don't have as much money, you can create a GitHub repo and post your projects on here you're working on. So I put things on here like a tool I put together a while back. My recent Taking a CISSP series I posted on here, and set up different repos. The cool thing about this is, especially for somebody seeing this, I could be like, hey, here's some projects I contributed to, and here's some things I've done, and you can see my work speak for itself, literally. I recommend this for those, especially coming from the academic world, if their experience is mostly school. Maybe create a couple of repos, or if you've done things like if you're on Hack the Box or done some CTFs, maybe post a write-up on some CTFs you've done. That is actually really helpful. And honestly, the best part about posting your write-ups, you're doing it in your own words. You aren't beholden to a company, so this is all completely up to you. If you've got a bunch, and not only that, the people that actually work in the community in security from a bunch of different roles, they might do CTFs every now and then. So you start building your own name recognition, and after a while, you're not even needing to write a resume. So there's ways you can, put together your own work and let that speak for itself on top of your resume. You want to arm yourself with as much as you can in terms of resources as possible. Next question, and these all kind of pile on each other. Question number 5. Do I need a community presence? What does that mean? So I mentioned conferences. I mentioned, stuff like Twitter, Reddit, and things like that. And you're asking yourself, do I need to be on there 24/7, or how much time do I need to spend? Do I need to go to conferences? Thankfully, because we're no longer in the before time, you have the option to go to these events online, not have to deal with being in meet space around thousands of other sweaty people. So that's cool. And despite all that, eventually I do want to go to in-person conferences. I do like getting away from a keyboard at some point. You don't need to. Don't be under the impression like just because I've worked a ton of conferences means that you have to go to conferences and I need to see you. It's perfectly fine if you don't want to. It will make it easier getting your foot in the door in some cases, especially if you have FaceTime with people. This is all going to depend on where you are, of course, what part of the world you're in. And with the engagement thing online, this is where it gets a little noisy. So I could tell you, go to this Discord or go to this Slack channel, and there are thousands out there, but that's the problem. There are thousands of, and there's some that are more popular than others. Like they might be a specific thing like the Hack the Box Slack channel or a Hack the Box Discord. The problem with that is you're gonna get on one or two, and then a week later you're gonna hear about more, and then one or two more. Next thing you know, you have 15 to 20 channels, and if you have them on all active because somebody told you they're the most urgent channel you have to be on, you're gonna have all these notifications every couple of seconds from all those different channels and all those people on those channels, and it's gonna get overwhelming fast. I'll tell you now, I've probably dialed down my number of channels I'm on to single-digit numbers altogether from all of Slack, and I don't even have them all on at once. Especially if I'm in the middle of working on a box or doing something else that requires more of my focus and attention. So I'd say take it with a grain of salt. Maybe get out there a little bit and talk to people, but do not be pressured into thinking you have to be at every conference and go to every event. Um, it helps a little bit in my case that a lot of these conferences I go to, I know people at a lot of them, so I'm like, oh hey, cool, I want to catch up with so and so. In some cases, and I've gone, I'll go to talks, things like that, take some notes, learn something, and I can tell you, once I got into security, the content of conferences I go to or the talks I choose to sit in are going to be a lot more focused on either something I want to do or something I'm really interested in, and not just trying to go to every talk or down a specific track. I was interested before I got into security. Now that I'm working, there are definitely some where I'm like, okay, that sounds like a good talk to go to. I can actually bring that to the table, and then I'll throw in a couple that I may be interested in, as far as away from keyboard or off hours topic wise. A lot of the conferences now that are online, they may post their videos on YouTube, so that's going to be a good place to find them. You can find a lot of old conference talks on there, and that's also pretty useful. Next question, number 6. This is a controversial one. What if you're not passionate? So, you'll hear a lot of us talk about passion and all that stuff, and this can be a tough one because at times your passion can be your biggest gift and your biggest curse in terms of your mental health with this line of work. Do you need to be passionate to get ahead? It helps. In my case, this is easy for me because I'm already passionate about it. So I can't really tell you the opposite of that end of that. However, I can tell you, for all my passion, the motivation is there for people, especially like for people that don't have kids, or that like myself that don't have kids or any like family or anything other than dogs. It's easy for me to focus on work and be passionate about it and be an idealist in that sense. On the other hand, there are people that have children, have households and livelihoods to take care of, that's their drive, and that's okay. A lot of people, especially getting your foot in the door, you're gonna be competing for your first roles. You're trying to get in your foot in the door, and you have people that have a lot more time on their hands than you, or some that have a lot less than you, from whatever life situation they have. Those things are going to be factors in how hard they're willing to work and how hard you're willing to work to get your foot in the door, get ahead, learn a skill. If it's just money you're looking for, well, there's lots of jobs out there that probably pay a lot more that you may not be passionate about. Maybe try those. I don't know. And that being said, there's a lot of jobs out there that you could be really passionate about that pay a lot less than these roles, and then information security roles. So take that into consideration. There, specifically with security, there's a lot of jobs in security that you might be passionate about the topic, but it doesn't necessarily pay as well as you'd like. Sure, whatever. There's also the a thing I mentioned someone too, is like, well, what if you like security, you're not passionate about the job, your one specific job, but there's other parts of security you like. So instead of climbing up the ladder on something you're super passionate about, what ends up burning you out, or worrying about making the highest pay or all these things, maybe find a good balance where you have a thing that you're passionate about that pays the bills, and then you can still tinker with stuff you like to do on your off time without having to work 80, 90-hour weeks. I had a buddy of mine who recently took a job at a SOC, wasn't paying as well, but that's not his primary source of income. So, but he likes security, likes messing with, you get to mess with a lot of different tools when you're working at a SOC, a lot of like monitoring blue team tools and stuff. So that was cool for him. And there's some, well, hey, high paying sales job, you can focus on, you can basically turn things you do in security into a hobby. You're making a lot of money, you're in security, but you're not. There's a different set of focus. I'm not going to say it's easy in sales. It's definitely not. I don't sell things. Not me. But there's cost, and there's you have to do a cost benefit analysis thing called based on what you want to do. If you're passionate about a topic, hey, great. If you're not wanting to burn yourself out, well, that's a tough one. I can tell you from working in tech, prior to security, there were definitely a lot of long nights I worked. And I wasn't necessarily the most passionate about working those long nights, troubleshooting a problem. I wanted to solve the problem. If anything, just find what works for you, find the pain you want to deal with, and you can take it as far as you want to go. So that brings us to the last question. Okay, you got your foot in the door. Now what? Well, here's the thing that is gonna really be frustrating for some of you to hear. Sit down for this one. Deep breath. There you go. All the other stuff I mentioned in those previous 6 steps, particularly questions 1 through 5, and all the work you've done to get up to this point, all that stuff you did, that just got you to day 1 at your next goal. Like, let's just say your goal was getting your foot in the door in job and security. All the stuff you've done up to that point was only good enough to get you in day 1. It's like with special forces, right? You hear all the stories about the training with the boats over the head and all that stuff. Police SEALs, San Diego. I just dropped something. All the training those guys do gets them to being day 1 of a Navy SEAL. That's it. That's why you don't hear a lot of them bragging about what they did in training. That's just day 1. So, and there are some parallels to that here in security. So what you're going to need to do, and there's something you kind of needed to be planning along the way, and it goes back to what these previous questions were about, asking lots of questions and building on your skills, is planning for your next path. And that's why I wanted to break this down to part 2 in terms of what I did once I got in security, things that did and didn't work, and and things to learn along the way. What I lack in a particular skill, I make up for in planning, preparation, and structuring that stuff out. And that's what I'll talk about in the next one. Don't have a final goal. Don't try and reach a plateau. So if you try and reach a plateau, that plateau 5 years from now might be something completely obsolete. If anything, start building up on those skills. Have a good idea. You'll want to narrow down, pick a few things to focus on, and run towards that hard shit. With that, I'm out of here, and I'll see you in the next video where I'll talk about the stuff I did that worked for me.